Good afternoon. Again, this is Niraj before you all people to discuss something tangible about research process, which was the course of discussion in our last class. As I wrote down over here, research process. When we talk about a little recap of the last class about research process, when we talk about research process, then essentially some scientific, some logical, some sequential steps come in our mind, and these steps are very much organized, comprising certain steps one by one, and accordingly if we move from first step to another step and likewise, then definitely we can reach at the end and complete our research project, whatever it may be. So it is very important, it is very imperative, essential to know about the research process, as it gives guidelines, a framework to the researcher to proceed his or her research work and to complete it. Then in different books, as I told you all in last class, certain steps are there. These steps might be written in the different manners, in the different numbers. However, for your convenience, I comprised all these steps in just 5 steps. First step is defining the problem. Another step is planning for research design. Third step is collection of data and required information. Fourth step is processing and analysis of data as well as interpretation of data and get at conclusion. And last step, to sum up all these things in the form of project and to present the project report before the required person. Fine. We have already know something about the first step of the research process, that is to define the research process. We all know how much this step is important. In fact, this is a pillar, this is basic foundation of any research project. Until and unless you decide, you define, you formulate research project, your research project in the rational manner, in the intellectual manner, in the comprehensive manner, in the operational manner, it would be worthless to proceed. As we all know, the basic management principle is planning before doing. So here we have to plan about what to do, how to do, when to do, and like all these things. And then afterward, we have to phrase our research project into operational or analytical term. So two things are integral part of defining the research problem. First part we may narrate as to understand the problem as much as possible. And second is, what do you understand? You narrate it, you phrase it in a very specific terms so that it can be understandable and communicable. Important thing. Now question arises, how will you understand? As in last class we discussed, just to discuss with the knowledgeable person, just to discuss with decision makers, just to discuss with organizational stalwart, organizational experts who are having good knowledge about the research subject in which, as the researcher, you are interested and you are undertaking the research work. You discuss as much as possible with the right persons, with your collegios or peers, with your seniors, with your mentors, with your teachers, or with others. Apart of that, you should also go through some literature. This is known as literature survey or literature review. This is also essential part of understanding the problem. When you go through some conceptual part, some conceptual material written down in books or internet or anywhere, then definitely you will be understanding the problem in greater extent. A part of having conceptual or theoretical literature review, you may also go through some empirical type of literature. Empirical means the research project which has already been done related to your research project, somehow related with your research project. You should also grab the facts. You should also know the things that likewise what was the research project and what was the method of data collection, what was the research design, or what were the tools of data collections, how data were analyzed, and what conclusion researcher got, and what was the way of presentation. When you understand all these things, then these give you some concrete idea, and this concrete idea will be definitely helpful in defining your problem in the precise manner. Now, after doing all these things, now you are able, you are eligible, you are capable to tell your problem, to write your problem in exact words, exact terms. This is known as phrasing the problem. It means the specific and most suitable terms you have to put down to tell about the research project, what as the researcher you are handling. This is important, and if there is any jargon, any technical words, any variable you are using in phrasing your research work, then you have to be very specific to define it, to make it clear, to elaborate it as much as possible. Once as the researcher you defined the problem, you narrate it in the specific manner, in operational term, then definitely it would be easy to proceed and to operate the further steps. So after defining the problem, next step is RD, that is research design. Now, if we look at these two terms, then one concept comes spontaneously in our mind, that design belongs to plan. Some concept, some idea, and when we formulate the idea or the concept about our research project which we are handling, then this is known as research design. Here we have to plan what steps, further steps, what tools we are going to take up to complete our research project. In fact, this is a complete conceptual framework, or it is a roadmap for further research activities. What is its benefit? If you plan, if you chalk out your all research activities, then this will not make you deviate from the well thought out process, well chosen steps. You will be very much concentrated on your chosen aspects, on your chosen course of action which you are going to take to complete your research project, and that is important. Now, when you plan for your research project, then planning about the future course of action, what you are going to take to complete your research, depends upon nature of research, what as the researcher you are taking up. Now, as we got some idea about nature or the objective of research, on the basis of objective, purpose or nature of the research, any research can be divided into exploratory type of research, or descriptive type of research, or diagnostic type of research, or causal type of research. Now, exploratory, here main objective is to define the problem, to understand the problem, and for the purpose your research approach should be flexible, it should not be rigid. You must seek the information from every possible corner and source. So you have to be flexible. Your research design must be flexible enough to get the required information from every possible source. Next one is descriptive. Here you have to be a rigid one. You have to plan. Planning is very important, and then you have to stick with your plan. Now, why planning is important? Why chalking out the steps are important? Because it minimizes biasness and increases reliability of your research project. And for the purpose, you have to choose, you have to write your steps, further steps, or the future actions, future plan in the precise and specific manner. Then in descriptive research, you have to describe the situation. You have to articulate the event, situation, or object, or the subject in which as the researcher you are interested. You portray the characteristics of the subject or object of your research project. You have to define the variables. You may also establish some relationships among the underlying variables to get at certain conclusion. So for the purpose, you have to plan that what would be the possible data, whether it would be primary data or secondary data, what would be possible source of data, and what would be tools to obtain the data, whether it would be questionnaire or some schedule or some telephonic interview or the personal interview. And once you collect the data, what you will do with data? I mean to say, how will you process the data, how will you analyze data by applying certain statistical measures? And if you are having hypothesis, then what statistical measure you will apply to justify your hypothesis, to check your hypothesis that whether it is acceptable or rejectable. Then how will you interpret your data, and how will you present, at last how will you present your project report? These all things have to be defined in descriptive research, and you have to stick with those plans. That is important. Third one is diagnostic. In diagnostic, you want to establish the relationship among variables. You are interested as the researcher to measure frequency of occurrence of a particular event. If an event or any observation is happening, then what is its frequency? You have to count it, you have to observe it, you have to note it. That will help you to understand its nature. And if other happening is also there, then what is its frequency? And then try to compare frequencies of two variables or more variables, and on the basis, if there is certain information, certain pertinent informations, if you receive, then that might be described in the form of conclusion. This is also very similar to descriptive type of research. So research design would be more or less similar. And the last, as I told you, causal type. This is quite scientific research. Here you are not interested only to know the relationship between variables, but you also manipulate one variable to assess its subsequent impact on other variable, like demand and price. As we all know, price is independent variable, demand is dependent, because demand depends on price. As law of demand says that price and demand are related in inverse manner. Price increases, demand decreases. So what you do as the researcher, when you conduct some experiments in terms of price and demand, you change the price in certain magnitude. Then after every change, you see, you measure its consequent impact on demand, and then on the ground of that you get at certain conclusion. So this is, so in that case also you have to be very rigid about your plan. Once you make the plan, then you have to stick with your plan. You need not be flexible. Various type of experiments are there. Some experiments are formal experiments, some are informal experiments, which we will discuss later on. Once we design of our research project, then we proceed to collect required data. Now, data or information might be collected from various sources. On the basis of source, two type of sources are there: primary data source and secondary. Primary data source is the first hand data which researcher collects himself or herself for his or her purpose. Secondary data is already available data someone has collected for his or own purpose, and you as the researcher are getting help of those data for your research purpose. So you decide whether it would be primary or secondary, and if primary data, then what is possible means of collecting data? What are the possible tools, like whether it would be observation, whether it would be focus group interview, in which there is the large group of people discussing on a table, discussing on a topic, and as the researcher, as the observer, you note down, and at last you get at conclusion on the basis of observations. Focus group interview, this is known as focus group interview, or it would be survey, it would be experiment. If survey, then whether it would be questionnaire, it would be personal interview, it would be telephonic interview, it would be schedule, you decide. Now once you collect all the needed information, it is the time to process and analyze. Data processing is made of four essential activities. First is editing, second one is coding, third one is classification, and fourth one is tabulation. Once you process data and get the tables, then now it is the time for data analysis. Here you use certain statistical tools to get the valid conclusion. Various tools like central tendency, mean, mode, median, or correlation, regressions, or many tools are there. Depending upon the nature of your research project, research topic, you choose the relevant tool, statistical tools, apply and get conclusion. Once you analyze your data, now it is the time of data interpretation and conclusion. You conclude it and then frame up all your work into the form of project report and then present it to before the needed people. This is all about the research process. In next class